When I first moved into Oak Ridge Terrace, I thought I had found paradise. The cul-de-sac was peaceful, with trimmed hedges and manicured lawns painting a picture of suburban tranquility. After years of apartment living, I was finally ready for my own piece of the American dream. A modest 3-bedroom with a garden I could nurture and call my own. The welcome wagon arrived on my second day. Neighbors brought casseroles and handshakes, genuine smiles and warm introductions. Everyone except house number 16, directly across from mine. That house belonged to Karen Winters, whose arrival was marked not by food but by a clipboard and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Welcome to Oak Ridge," she said, standing at my doorway with perfect posture. "I am the vice president of our homeowners association. I just wanted to personally deliver your welcome packet and review a few of our community standards." I invited her in, offering coffee which she refused with a slight wrinkle of her nose. As she flipped through the rule book, highlighting sections about lawn maintenance schedules and approved exterior paint colors, I nodded politely while mentally questioning my life choices. "Your hydrangeas are lovely," she commented, peering through my living room window at my front garden. "Though I notice you have the sprinkler running during peak hours. We try to be conscious of water conservation here." Her tone suggested this was less observation, more accusation. I explained I was still getting used to the irrigation timing system, which earned me a thin smile and a business card with her personal number for any questions about compliance. The first month passed in a blur of unpacking and settling in. When my water bill arrived, I nearly choked on my morning toast. The amount was almost double what I had budgeted. Puzzled, I checked for leaks and recalculated my usage. Perhaps I had been overenthusiastic with the garden. New grass did need extra attention after all. One evening while checking my mailbox, I met Gerald, a retired postal worker who had lived in Oak Ridge for over 20 years. We chatted about the neighborhood, and when I mentioned my surprisingly high water bill, something flickered across his weathered face. "Might want to keep an eye on your equipment," he said, voice lowered despite no one being nearby. "Some folks around here have territorial habits, if you catch my drift, especially the one across from you." I laughed it off, but his words lingered as I walked back to my house. Across the street, Karen stood in her driveway, measuring the height of her rose bushes with a ruler. She looked up, catching my gaze, and gave a small wave that felt more like a warning. That night, I double-checked that my garden hose was properly coiled and the tap was shut off tight, just in case. But deep down, I told myself Gerald was being dramatic. Surely no one would be petty enough to steal water in a middle-class suburban neighborhood where most people could afford pool installations and automatic sprinkler systems. I decided to let it go, for now. After all, I was the newcomer here, and making accusations would only brand me as troublesome. Better to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and focus on building my new life. Yet something about Karen's perfect roses and her critical glances toward my landscaping efforts left me uneasy. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe, beneath the surface of Oak Ridge Terrace's pristine facade, there lurked a battle for territorial dominance I had unwittingly entered. After the conversation with Gerald, I could not shake the suspicion that something was amiss. My second water bill arrived, still unusually high despite my conservative usage. I began taking notes of my watering schedule, marking down exactly when I used the sprinkler and for how long. The math did not add up. Something or someone was draining my supply. That weekend, I purchased a small security camera online. Nothing fancy, just a motion-activated model that connected to my phone. I mounted it discreetly under the eaves, positioned with a clear view of my garden hose connection. If someone was borrowing my water, I would have proof. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on Thursday morning at precisely 6:45, my phone buzzed with an alert. Half asleep, I opened the notification and nearly dropped my phone. There, in living color, was Karen Winters, wearing a floral bathrobe and garden gloves, carefully unscrewing my hose from the spigot. With practiced efficiency, she dragged it across the street to her prized rose garden. I watched in real time as she meticulously watered each bush, taking nearly 30 minutes before returning the hose, not quite to its original position, but close enough that an unobservant person might not notice. The entitlement on display was breathtaking. Later that morning, I waited until I saw her retrieving her mail before approaching. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "Good morning, Karen. I noticed something strange on my security camera today." Her back stiffened. "Security camera, you have been recording the street. That is a privacy concern, you know." "Not the street, my property," I clarified. "Specifically my garden hose, which seems to have traveled across to your roses early this morning." Her face flushed momentarily before settling into a mask of indignation. "Your hose was lying across our property line. I simply moved it back to where it belonged. If anything, you should be more careful about where you leave your equipment." The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. "Karen, I have video of you disconnecting it from my house and taking it to yours. I'm just asking you to please ask permission before using my things." Her eyes narrowed to slits. "Are you accusing me of theft? Because that is a serious allegation. The HOA takes neighbor disputes very seriously, especially when they involve surveillance without proper notification." Before I could respond, she turned on her heel and marched back to her house. I stood there, mouth agape, wondering how she had managed to flip the situation so completely. 2 days later, an official letter arrived from the Oak Ridge Terrace Homeowners Association. It contained a formal warning regarding invasive surveillance equipment and creating a hostile community environment. The letter was signed by the HOA president, but the wording had Karen's fingerprints all over it. That evening I sat on my porch, watching as neighbors returned from work. Several averted their eyes when they saw me. Word had spread, Karen was crafting a narrative and I was being cast as the villain. She had leveraged her position to turn my legitimate complaint into a community offense. This was no longer about a garden hose. This was about power, control, and a person who believed rules applied to everyone but herself. I ordered 2 more cameras that night, better ones with improved night vision and wider angles. I installed them legally, pointed exclusively at my property, and posted the required notification signs. I began documenting everything, every interaction, every coincidence, every rule selectively enforced. If Karen wanted a paper trail, I would give her one, but mine would be based on facts, not manipulation. I was not looking for a war, but I would not be bulldozed on my own property. Not by her, not by anyone. They say the best revenge is living well, but sometimes living well requires a bit of creative problem-solving. After receiving the HOA warning, I knew a direct confrontation would only escalate matters. Karen had the board in her pocket, and neighbors too intimidated to speak against her. I needed a different approach, something that could not be traced back to malicious intent, but would deliver a clear message. The idea came to me during a late-night internet rabbit hole. I was researching property line disputes when an advertisement caught my eye: lawn dye used by landscapers for special events. Available in multiple colors, non-toxic, and completely legal. Most importantly, it would wash out after a few heavy rains, leaving no permanent damage. I ordered a gallon of the brightest pink they offered, along with some basic plumbing supplies. The plan forming in my mind was not just petty revenge, it was poetic justice. If Karen insisted on using my water, she would get exactly what she paid for. Over the next few days, I acted completely normal. I waved to Karen when our paths crossed, making her suspiciously eye me from her driveway. I even attended the monthly HOA meeting, where I sat quietly and voted along with the majority on mundane issues like replacing the neighborhood entrance sign. Karen watched me the entire time, clearly waiting for me to cause a scene about the warning letter. I never did. Meanwhile, in my garage, I was building a simple but effective system. I modified a section of garden hose with a small valve that could be opened remotely. Connected to this valve was a container of the pink dye, diluted to the perfect concentration, strong enough to stain temporarily but not strong enough to appear deliberately sabotaged. I tested my creation late one night in my backyard, on a small patch of grass hidden from street view. The results were spectacular, a vibrant pink that would be impossible to ignore but would not permanently damage the grass. Within 2 weeks, and after a good rain, the color would fade completely. The final piece was timing. I needed to ensure Karen would take the bait without becoming suspicious. I began a new routine of forgetting to coil my hose properly, leaving it stretched closer to the property line than necessary. Each day, I moved it slightly closer, making it more tempting. All the while, I maintained a friendly facade. I brought homemade cookies to Mrs. Peterson next door, helped Mr. Collins across the street with his garbage bins, and even complimented Karen on her roses when we passed each other. "They look so healthy," I said with a smile. "Your watering schedule must be perfect." She preened at the comment, not catching the double meaning. "Yes, well, proper hydration is key to vibrant blooms," she replied, chin held high. "Not everyone understands the importance of consistency." I nodded in agreement. Absolutely, consistency is everything. The cameras continued recording every night. Karen had not taken the hose again since being caught, but I could see her eyeing it during her morning garden inspections. The water bill remained suspicious, suggesting she might be helping herself when I was at work or sleeping. Patience was the hardest part. I wanted immediate satisfaction, but rushing would spoil everything. So I waited, documented, and prepared. The trap was set. All I needed was for Karen to fall back into her old habits, which, based on my observations of her character, was only a matter of time. People like Karen never change. They just get better at hiding their actions. But this time, her actions would not stay hidden for long. They would be displayed across her front lawn in glorious technicolor. Friday dawned clear and beautiful, perfect weather for gardening. Or, in my case, perfect weather for justice. I had deliberately left my hose uncoiled the night before, stretched tantalizingly close to the property line. The dye injector was primed and ready, hidden within an ordinary-looking connection point. From the outside, it appeared to be a simple repair section. I woke before sunrise, positioning myself by the window with a cup of coffee and my phone open to the security camera feed. The neighborhood was silent, most residents still asleep. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and the sprinklers from the community lawns had just finished their scheduled cycle. At exactly 6:42, 3 minutes earlier than her usual routine, Karen appeared. She was already dressed in her gardening outfit, complete with wide-brimmed hat and floral gloves. She paused at the edge of her driveway, scanning the street for any early risers. Seeing no one, she made her move. With practiced efficiency, she crossed to my yard, grabbed the hose, and dragged it across the street. She connected it to her sprinkler system, a more elaborate setup than I had realized. Not just spot watering for roses anymore. She had expanded her operation to cover her entire front lawn. I pressed the button on my phone that activated the valve. Nothing visible happened immediately. The dye was designed to develop slowly with exposure to sunlight. Karen finished setting up the sprinkler, turned on the water, and returned to her garage, presumably to work on other gardening tasks while my water did her landscaping for her. For the next hour, her lawn received a generous coating of what appeared to be ordinary water. The sprinkler arced gracefully back and forth, creating rainbows in the early morning light. To the casual observer, nothing seemed amiss, but I knew what was coming. Around 8:30, as neighbors began leaving for work, the transformation began. What started as a faint pink tinge intensified with each passing minute. The rising sun activated the dye, turning Karen's pristine green lawn into a cotton candy wonderland. The color spread in beautiful patterns from the sprinkler's reach, creating a bullseye effect with the brightest concentration in the center. I left for work, not wanting to be present for the inevitable discovery. But I kept the camera feed open on my phone, waiting for the moment of truth. It came at 9:15. Karen stepped out of her garage carrying a bag of fertilizer, stopped dead in her tracks, and dropped the bag on her driveway. Even through the small screen of my phone, I could see the blood drain from her face. She ran to the lawn, kneeling to touch the grass as if confirming it was real. Then came the panic, rushing to turn off the sprinkler, disconnecting my hose, and frantically trying to spray the affected areas with clean water, which only spread the dye further. By 9:30, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors on their way to work had stopped to stare at the spectacle. Some were taking pictures, Others were not even trying to hide their laughter. Mrs. Peterson from next door was openly pointing while talking to Mr. Collins. I returned home for lunch, timing my arrival perfectly. Karen was on her hands and knees, scrubbing at the grass with what appeared to be dish soap and a brush. The effort was not only futile, but was further damaging her lawn. When she saw my car pull into the driveway, she dropped her tools and marched across the street, face contorted with rage. "You did this," she screamed, pointing a soapy finger at me. "You sabotaged my lawn." I stepped out of my car with an expression of innocent confusion. "Did what? I have been at work all morning." "My lawn is pink, and it started right after She stopped abruptly, realizing what she was about to admit. "After you what, Karen?" I asked, voice level and calm. "After the sprinkler system malfunctioned," she finished lamely. "With my hose?" I pointed to the now hastily returned garden hose, lying in a tangled heap near my spigot. "The same hose you have been using without permission for months now, the one that has been running up my water bill." Her face flushed almost as pink as her lawn. "You cannot prove anything." "Actually, I can. I have footage of every time you have taken it, including this morning." That shut her up. For perhaps the first time since I had met her, Karen Winters was speechless. She glanced around, noticing the growing audience of neighbors, some pretending to check their mail or work in their gardens, all while watching the drama unfold. "This is not over," she hissed before stomping back to her fluorescent disaster zone. No, I thought, watching her retreat. It certainly was not over, but the balance of power had shifted, and we both knew it. The pink lawn stood as a beacon, visible proof of her entitlement and dishonesty, and judging by the barely concealed smirks from our neighbors, I was not the only one enjoying this turn of events. I fully expected retaliation from Karen, but she moved faster than anticipated. By 5 o'clock that same evening, every homeowner in Oak Ridge Terrace had received an email announcing an emergency HOA meeting to address acts of vandalism and property damage within our community. The meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock at the community clubhouse. Clearly, Karen was not wasting any time. I arrived 10 minutes early, bringing with me a tablet loaded with all my documentation, water bills, timestamps, and most importantly, video footage. The room was already half full, with neighbors speaking in hushed tones that quieted when I entered. Karen sat at the front table alongside the HOA president, a mild-mannered accountant named Howard who always seemed slightly overwhelmed by Karen's intensity. "Let us begin," Karen announced once the room had filled. Her voice carried the forced composure of someone barely containing their rage. "We have called this emergency meeting to address a serious act of vandalism that occurred this morning." She clicked through a slideshow of her pink lawn, eliciting a few poorly disguised chuckles from the audience. "This is not a laughing matter," she snapped. "This is criminal property damage, and we have reason to believe it was a deliberate attack by a community member." All eyes turned to me. "Before we continue," Howard interjected, "perhaps we should allow everyone to speak. Karen has made an accusation, but we should hear all sides." Karen's jaw tightened, but she nodded stiffly. "Our newest resident has installed unauthorized surveillance equipment and has demonstrated hostility since moving in. Shortly after expressing disagreement with HOA policies, my property was vandalized. The timing is suspicious at best, malicious at worst." Howard turned to me. "Would you like to respond?" I stood up, tablet in hand. "I appreciate the opportunity. I installed security cameras on my property after noticing discrepancies in my water usage. I would like to present evidence regarding what actually happened this morning and on multiple mornings before today." I connected my tablet to the projector and played the footage from that morning. The room fell silent as they watched Karen take my hose without permission. Then I showed clips from previous instances, at least 6 separate occasions over the past month. "My water bills have been unusually high since moving in," I explained calmly. "Now you can see why. As for the pink lawn, I cannot explain that. Perhaps there was something in the soil or fertilizer. But what I can prove is that Karen has been using my water without permission for weeks and has denied it when confronted directly." Karen shot to her feet. That is irrelevant. Someone damaged my property. An older woman in the back raised her hand. Karen, did you ask permission to use that hose? That is not the point. Actually, Howard interrupted, looking uncomfortable, unauthorized use of another's property and utilities is against HOA bylaws. Section 4, paragraph 7. Karen stared at him in disbelief. Are you taking their side? My lawn is ruined. The color will wash out in a week or two, someone called from the back. My cousin used that same stuff for a gender reveal party. This prompted another round of poorly concealed laughter. Karen's face turned scarlet. This is unacceptable. I demand action. Howard cleared his throat. Karen, given the evidence presented, I think we need to address your actions first. Unauthorized use of another resident's utilities is grounds for review of your position on the board. The room went pin-drop silent. Karen's position was her identity, her source of power in the community. To have it threatened was unprecedented. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, neighbors began sharing their own stories. She cited me for my holiday lights being up 2 days past the removal date, but her own stayed up a week longer, said one man. My children's basketball hoop was deemed unsightly, while her grandson's identical one was allowed, added a woman near the front. She threatened to fine me for my grass being too long the day after my husband's surgery. An elderly woman contributed quietly. Years of resentment poured out, selective enforcement, personal vendettas, small abuses of power that had accumulated into a mountain of discontent. All it took was one pink lawn to break the dam of silence. Howard looked increasingly uncomfortable as the testimonies continued. Finally, he held up his hands. In light of these concerns, I think it appropriate that Karen temporarily step down from her position while the board conducts a review of these allegations. This is outrageous, Karen sputtered. I have given years of service to this community. And we appreciate that, Howard said firmly. But rules must apply equally to everyone. That includes board members. Karen grabbed her purse and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. A collective exhale filled the room, followed by the buzz of conversation. I sat quietly, not joining in the gossip. This had not been about humiliating Karen, but establishing boundaries. As people began to leave, several neighbors patted my shoulder or gave me appreciative nods. Gerald, the retired postal worker who had first warned me, winked as he passed. Pink was a nice touch, he whispered. Perfectly visible from the satellite view on Google Maps, too. I suppressed a smile. That had not been part of my plan, but it was certainly a satisfying bonus. For 3 blessed days, Karen remained unseen, curtains drawn, garage door closed, her now famous pink lawn standing as a silent testament to her defeat. I began to hope that perhaps she had accepted the situation and was retreating with what dignity she had left. I should have known better. On the 4th day, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. Officer Reynolds introduced himself politely enough, explaining he was following up on a complaint about property damage. Someone filed a report claiming you deliberately vandalized their lawn with chemical agents, he explained, sounding about as enthusiastic as someone reading from a phone book. Given the, visible nature of the alleged damage, we had to follow up. I invited him in, offered coffee, which he gratefully accepted, and showed him the same security footage I had presented at the HOA meeting. I explained the situation calmly, including Karen's unauthorized use of my water and the subsequent discovery of her pink lawn. So you had nothing to do with the color change? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Officer, I cannot explain why her grass turned pink. All I know is that she was using my water without permission, which is documented here. Perhaps something on her property reacted with the water. He nodded, made a few notes, and finished his coffee. Between us, he said, standing to leave, we get at least 1 call a month from this neighborhood, usually involving the same complainant. Most officers know the address by heart now. That afternoon, a formal cease and desist letter arrived from the law offices of Williams and Burke. demanding I remove all surveillance equipment targeting Karen Winter's property and pay for landscape restoration costs, estimated at $3,000. The letter was on impressive letterhead, but contained multiple grammatical errors and cited non-existent legal codes. A quick internet search revealed Williams and Burke did not exist in our state's bar directory. The return address belonged to a strip mall copy shop. It seemed Karen had drafted her own legal threat. Rather than responding directly, I forwarded the letter to Howard with a polite note explaining the continued harassment. Within hours, Karen received her second official warning from the HOA, this time for falsifying legal documents, a clear violation of community standards regarding fraudulent activity. But Karen was not finished. Over the next week, she filed noise complaints about power tools used at inappropriate hours. I own none, reported suspicious gatherings at my house, a book club meeting with 4 people, and called animal control about a dangerous dog on my property. I had no pets. Each complaint was investigated and dismissed. Each dismissal further eroded her already damaged credibility. Yet she persisted, growing increasingly desperate as her tactics failed. The final straw came when she attempted to claim my sprinkler was angled to deliberately spray her driveway, a minor annoyance she had magnified into water damage to property. Howard and 2 other board members came to inspect, finding her claims were not only exaggerated but physically impossible given the distance between properties. As they were leaving, Karen emerged from her house, attempting to buttonhole them with new accusations. Howard's patience had finally reached its limit. "Karen," he said firmly, loud enough for nearby neighbors to hear, "the board has voted. You have been removed from your position permanently for multiple violations of HOA ethical standards. Any further complaints must be submitted in writing and will require substantial evidence." Her face crumpled, decades of unchallenged authority stripped away in a single moment. Without her position, she was just another resident, subject to the same rules she had wielded as weapons against others. That evening, several neighbors stopped by my house with wine, cookies, and in one case a congratulatory plant. No one explicitly mentioned Karen's downfall, but the relief in their expressions said everything. For years, they had endured her reign of petty tyranny. Now they could finally relax. I accepted their gifts with grace, never confirming or denying my role in the Pink Lawn incident. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, especially in suburbia. As summer faded into fall, Karen's lawn gradually returned to its natural color. 2 heavy rainstorms in time did what frantic scrubbing could not, washing away the vibrant pink to leave only the faintest blush visible in certain lights. By Halloween, you would never know what had transpired, except that every child in the neighborhood had heard the story, and the Pink Lawn Lady became a local boogeyman in their games. Karen herself withdrew from community life. No more garden inspections, no more measuring hedges with rulers. She declined to attend HOA meetings even as a regular member. Her roses, once her pride and joy, went untended until Gerald quietly pruned them one evening, unable to watch good plants suffer regardless of their owner. In November, a "for sale" sign appeared in her front yard. By December, moving trucks arrived. She departed on a Tuesday morning without saying goodbye to anyone, her rearview mirror reflecting a neighborhood she could no longer control. The new owners were a young couple with a toddler and another baby on the way. They arrived with furniture too modern for the traditional neighborhood aesthetic and painted their front door a cheerful yellow that would have given Karen heart palpitations. No one complained. Melissa, the wife, brought me homemade banana bread during their first week. "We have heard so much about you," she said with a grin. "Apparently there is some legendary hose incident." I laughed and invited her in for coffee. Neighborhood folklore, probably exaggerated. "Well, according to Mrs. Peterson, we have big shoes to fill. Apparently our lawn has a colorful history." I smiled, something like that. With Karen gone, the community bloomed. The spring after her departure saw more front yard gatherings, children playing across property lines, and a general relaxation of the invisible boundaries that had kept everyone isolated. Howard proved to be a fair-minded HOA president, enforcing rules with common sense rather than rigid absolutism. As for me, I installed a proper irrigation system, rendering garden hoses largely unnecessary. Still, I kept one coiled neatly by the spigot, a reminder of sorts. Occasionally, neighbors would reference the pink lawn incident with knowing smiles, and though I never confirmed my involvement, I never denied it either. One perfect spring morning, a year after Karen's departure, I sat on my porch watching the neighborhood come alive. Gerald waved from his daily walk. The new family across the street played with their toddler on their vibrant green lawn. Mrs. Peterson tended her daffodils while chatting with Mr. Collins. I held my coffee mug, savoring both the warmth and the peace I had fought for. Sometimes the best revenge is not loud or destructive. It is patient, clever, and perfectly calibrated to the offense. Karen had taken what was not hers, imposed her will on others, and believed her position made her untouchable. In the end, all it took was one person willing to stand their ground, and perhaps a little pink dye, to remind everyone that no one is above the basic rules of decency and respect. I uncoiled my hose and began watering my garden, smiling at the memory. The water flowed clear and pure, exactly as it should, and this time I knew exactly who was using it.